Hello, I'm Naina. I'm a paralegal in the real estate and projects team. I'll be joined with Natalie Anderson, who is also a paralegal in the real estate and projects team. We will be discussing red flags for consumer house builders and COVID clauses. Firstly, I'll just explain the Consumer Code for home builders. The Consumer Code for Home Builders is an industry-led scheme which gives protection and rights to the purchasers of new homes, ensuring that new home buyers are treated fairly and are fully informed about their purchase before and after they sign the contract. This will apply to mostly off-plan development sales, whether shared ownership or an open market, where the new build warranty is provided by either NHBC, Premier Guarantee or LABC.
Moving house can be stressful enough, especially during this pandemic. COVID clauses can keep residential property transactions moving and keep the parties' minds at ease. New COVID clauses allow parties to exchange contracts with the comfort of knowing there will be no penalty if completion is delayed due to a coronavirus-related event. COVID clauses enable transactions to continue where coronavirus would delay completion if, due to the virus, staff at the buyers and sellers solicitor or the lender are not available, the buyer or seller or anyone living with them is ill or self-quarantining, the government introduces recommended or mandatory measures to reduce transmission, for example, localised lockdowns, there is disruption to the post or sending money electronically, the buyer or seller cannot properly execute documents, for example, if there is no witness available, the buyer cannot carry out standard pre-completion searches, a lender withdraws their offer to finance the purchase, or there are delays elsewhere in the chain which are also caused by similar events.
I'll just explain a bit also about how the COVID clause works. The party's right to serve a notice to complete will be suspended while an event related to COVID-19 prevents the other party from completing. And also if a party will not be in breach of its obligations because of a delay caused by COVID-19. And either party may terminate the contract if completion does not take place by a specified long stop date of 2 to 3 months, fixed at an agreed date beyond the contractual completion date. When considering a long stop date, purchasers should bear in mind the recent stamp duty holiday, which ends on the March 31st next year.
There are a number of advantages to using a COVID clause. The main advantage is that it will encourage purchasers to exchange, knowing there is a safety net if they encounter any COVID-19 issues. It will also benefit any sellers if there are delays in arranging for documents to be completed on time. In contracts without a COVID clause, if either party is unable to complete on the specified date, compensation will be due to the other party for any delay. Completion can be delayed for an agreed period with no penalty or breach if a COVID clause is included. In a world of uncertainty, COVID clauses provide some reassurance and minimise the risk of parties failing to comply with contractual terms through no fault of their own. COVID clauses also include a deadline for completion in the event that, for example, restrictions continue longer than expected and a party is unable to complete. An agreed long stop date means that the contract can be rescinded and the deposit returned to the buyer if completion cannot be achieved by the agreed date due to coronavirus. If one party cannot move because of a coronavirus event, such as the events listed in the previous slide, then that can set a whole domino effect in motion, whereby each party in the chain is in breach of their contract and faces action to claim damages and compensation. It is much easier to avoid this by all parties in the chain having a COVID clause on identical terms.
There are also some red flags for consumer house builders, so there are some disadvantages of the clause. For example, uncertainty around completion dates because these can be delayed or the transaction could fall through entirely. But this is likely to be outweighed by the advantage of being able to get into contract despite the current uncertainties. This is particularly relevant where there are delays on works being carried out on this development. It is important for consumer house builders to advise buyers of any potential delays which would trigger the COVID clause as soon as reasonably possible, and they must also keep the buyers up to date on any delays caused by COVID-19. As previously mentioned, COVID clauses will include a long stop date in the event that either party are not able to complete for one of the listed reasons. While this might be a benefit to a buyer, this should also be highlighted to the sellers as a potential red flag when agreeing to include a COVID clause. There are some changes that can be made to increase certainty. For example, to oblige the parties to use reasonable endeavours to overcome any such issues and placing an appropriate long stop date by when completion must occur, failing which the agreement can be terminated.
There's been a lot of discussion around the use of COVID clauses recently, with one commentator noting that there have been a spike in clients asking for COVID clauses to be inserted into their contracts when moving home, with around half of clients requesting them as they are concerned that local lockdowns could prevent them from moving to their new home. Another writer summarised the use of COVID clauses by saying, if you have a standard conveyancing contract without a COVID clause and you are unable to move because you cannot leave your house due to a local lockdown, then you could face financial penalties. You do, however, need to be wary of the impact with the chain of sales, as your own sale and purchase could be affected by a coronavirus event affecting a third party. All parties in a chain should consider COVID clauses to ensure that completions can occur on a similar basis.
Certain estate agents says it is writing coronavirus event clauses into some contracts to protect buyers and sellers from claims that may arise due to delays during the virus outbreak. Another recent publication, someone has also said a number of simultaneous exchanges and completions are also taking place, which minimize the risk of anything untoward taking place between these two stages, which are usually several weeks apart. Furthermore, some buyers are paying reduced exchange deposits of 5 to 7% compared to the usual 10% to minimize the financial risk. In terms of its London activities, 1 in 5 property sales underway in London when the pandemic struck have fallen through, meaning the vast majority of the buyers and sellers have held their nerve. To summarize, it is clear that COVID-19 clauses have allowed transactions to continue throughout the pandemic. The clauses offer protection at a time where there is a lot of uncertainty. There are clear advantages to including a COVID-19 clause, but parties need to be aware of the risks and potential delays which can still arise even with the inclusion of this clause. Thank you for listening to this webinar.